Pat was a terrific student. She always just got A's and without blinking. Me, if I got a C, I was doing well. And it was, she said, I don't understand you. She said, you've got all the brains in the world, and how could you be such a horrible student when you were in high school and all that? And I said, I don't know. I said, I just wasn't interested until I got in the printing class, and that way I found what I wanted to do. Well, I knew that I loved her. I mean, lust always has an element when you're that age. But I knew that I loved her. I had a great deal of affection for her and a great deal of respect for her. But what I really learned over the years is how to appreciate her. Appreciate her for the woman and the person that she is, or she was. And the more I learned to appreciate, the more I learned about her, the more I learned of the way she was, the way she uh, supported me, supported our family, and supported our marriage. When she had every reason to say, the hell with it. Uh, that's just the character, the kind of person that she was.
Il mio cuore si eleva e ti trova vicino. È vero, il tempo vola via, ma la tua voce ferma il mio orologio. Il tempo scorre inesorabile, ma con la tua aria io. È vero, seguo sempre il ritmo nelle stelle. Il mio sogno si perde e ti sento accanto. È vero, la notte passa in fretta, ma il tuo sguardo illumina il mio cammino. Il buio cade inevitabile, ma con il tuo sorriso io.
Hey, hello, my name is Michael Stare. I was married for 47 years to the most wonderful gift God ever gave me. And my hope today is to impart some of that knowledge, experience, and information to all of you who may be watching. My wife's name was Patricia. And the way that I met her was I had enlisted in the Marine Corps and had just finished a tour in Vietnam and got back home in 1966 in June, late May or early June of 66. I forget the exact date. And I had a cousin who used to write me faithfully when I was in Vietnam, and we were always very close. So she was in nursing school in Chicago as well. And so I went in to see her. And just to thank her, and spend some time with her because she had been we always been such good friends. And she was living with 3 other nursing students, one of which happened to be Pat. And that's how we met. So while I was home on leave, Pat and I went out and dated a couple times, had a very good time, and really seemed to enjoy each other's company. And I really liked her. But here I was just a corporal in the Marine Corps, and here she was around all these medical students and stuff like that. And I thought, well, when I leave here, it's sayonara. So I reported to my duty station at Cherry Point, North Carolina. And a little time went past, and I decided to call her one time when I was out on Liberty. And she said, I wondered if you were ever going to call. So, okay. So I made arrangements to get what they call a 96-hour pass. So I drove from North Carolina to Chicago to see her. And just the relationship just started to flourish. And along came the holidays, and I had some leave, so I came home on 10 days leave. And at that time, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. Which, okay, this is good. And I said, I better speak to your dad, make sure it's okay with him. So I went to see my father-in-law to be and told him what we wanted to do. And, he asked me, well, how are you going to take care of her? And I said, I'm not exactly sure. I had to be perfectly honest with the guy. I wasn't going to make up stuff. I told him I've got my journeyman in the printing trade. I said, that may be where I go back to when I get out of the service. Or I may decide to go to school. I don't know yet. But I know that I want to get married to Pat, and I'd like your permission. And he said, okay. I mean, he didn't know the complications that would occur when she came down to North Carolina. That they would say that because of the North Carolina state law that she was not of age, she was only 20. She had to be 21, I guess. But anyway, I mean, with her father's permission, she could get married. So she said, I just want a very small wedding. She says, I don't want a big, overblown affair. And I said, well, that's fine with me. She just wanted a couple of friends and immediate family. And I had a couple buddies, who I would have invited. But as it turns out, the two mother-in-laws-to-be decided that this was not good enough. And this whole thing blossomed into this pretty grandiose affair with a country club reception and all kinds of stuff. And well, Pat hadn't told me any of this was going on. She was kind of absorbing all of these blows as they came. And anyway, her friend said, well, you've got to tell Mike about this, because this is not what you wanted, and it sounds like it's getting way out of hand. And so she called me, or I called her, I don't remember which it was, but anyway, she was on the phone, and she says, I have to tell you what's going on with the wedding plans. And I said, well, I thought we kind of agreed that it was going to be a small affair. And so she started to explain to me about the country club reception and all this was going on, and the contention between the two mother-in-laws to be that one was kind of outdo the other. And I said, well, this is insane. No, you don't. You don't need to be going through all this. She was just finishing up her internship, so she had the pressure of that on her. Besides trying to contend with her mother and my mother. And she was just about to wrap up her internship, and she had taken her state boards and passed, and so she knew she was going to get her license. And so it was a matter of just finishing up her clinical work on the internship. And so I says, well, she said, I asked her when she was going to finish that, and she explained it to me, how she had a couple more weeks to go. And I said, well, look, then why don't you come down here and stay at the hospitality house? Yeah, on the base, there was sort of like a mini motel that civilian guests could stay at while they're visiting guys in the service. And I said, well, we'll just sort the whole mess out, So anyway, so she came down and stayed at the hospitality house. And, we just said, well, why don't we just get married down here? We'll invite our parents and, just have a small wedding down here at the chapel. And she said, no, she said, that's fine. She said, I'm all for that. And I said, in the meantime, we got to make living arrangements for you. And so I had a buddy who happened to be from Pittsburgh, and by the name of Steve Yatsilla. He and his wife had quarters in the enlisted men's housing. And so they invited Pat to stay there. They had an extra bedroom. So Pat moved in with them. And at that time, there was a saying in the Marine Corps, if the Marine Corps wanted you to have a wife, they issued you one. I mean, the Marine Corps couldn't stop you from getting married, but they certainly didn't encourage it. Because in a Fleet Marine Force, you were expected to be able to move out in 24 hours notice. And that kind of left your dependents pretty much left to their own devices. So it wasn't something that was encouraged. So I had to go get permission to get married. So I had to go in and see my commanding officer, was a major by the name of Coangelo. Great guy. And he said to me, he said, look, Stare. He said, enlisted men's housing and junior NCO housing over there, he says, filled with young couples like you and your fiance want to be. He says, and got kids crawling on the walls. And he said, you know, a lot of these young folks don't have any more than a high school education. He said, no, I'm sure your fiance is a very lovely young lady. But, well, what does she do? And I said, well, she's a registered nurse. And he said, well, why the hell didn't you say so? And I said, well, you really never asked me, sir. And he says, no, go ahead. You know, that's fine. Once we decided to get married, we had told both parents that we just want this to be a very small, low-key affair, you know, nothing grandiose. I mean, first of all, the monetary expense. You know, neither one, she was just getting out of school, and I was making all the $200 a month as a corporal. So it wasn't as if we had all kinds of money to spend on a lavish wedding and a country club reception and all that stuff. So it just wasn't prudent. In fact, she didn't even want me to get a diamond. So when I went to buy the wedding rings at the post exchange, I had 36 bucks in my pocket, and I bought the rings, and I walked out with $6 in my pocket and a set of wedding rings. So it was pretty utilitarian, and she was perfectly fine with that. She did not want to waste money on expensive baubles. That wasn't where her heart was. She said, that doesn't mean much. You know, the wedding ring is fine. So during the course of all this, what we're seeing, so we set a date to get married on April 27th in 1967. So we invited both parents, and they declined to come. I still can't explain that, and I don't intend to. You know, I've never discussed it with them further. It was a decision they made, and fine. So my CEO and my gunnery sergeant and all my buddies showed up at the chapel, and yeah, it was a disappointment that they didn't come. I will say in all candor that my mother never made it easy for Pat, for whatever reason. I just never really understood why my mother was the way, it could be the way she was sometimes toward my wife. And it's just something I decided I'm not going to worry about. It just isn't worth wasting my time over. It was a disappointment to Pat. On the other hand, her folks were very welcoming to me, and never mentioned the fact that they didn't come to the wedding. And when our daughter was born 10 and a half months later, you know, they were very delighted in the fact that they had a granddaughter. And my mother too was very overjoyed at the fact that she had a granddaughter.
In the kitchen with a smile so sweet, rocking baby Anne Marie to sleep. She's the joy in every beat. Happy vibes and memories.
We didn't say, yeah, let's have a baby as soon as we can. We just did. So,
rock on, with little Anne Marie. Yeah. In the yard, swinging to and fro.
so the rumor was when I heard that Pat was pregnant that they thought she was that was the reason why we got married in North Carolina, is because she was already pregnant, and then that was completely false. All you need to do is look at a calendar, and you can figure out for yourself that it's mathematically impossible for that to happen. So we didn't plan it, but when we found out we were pregnant, uh, wow, this is a whole new dimension to life, you know. Pat carried Anne Marie, and it was interesting because she never really showed that much. I mean, I've seen some women who are, look like, wow, she's going to make it to the end of the day. But Pat never showed that much. But when she did have Anne Marie, uh, I got her to the base hospital that morning, and the interesting thing was that I couldn't stay because I didn't have sufficient rank. If I had been a staff NCO or officer, I could have stayed and been with her in the at least in the maternity ward, or in the waiting room there. But because I was such low in rank that I had to go back to my duty station and work and keep in touch by phone as to when Anne Marie was born. When she was born, when Pat did deliver, which I guess it wasn't a terribly difficult delivery as deliveries go. I mean, what do I know? But this is what Pat explained to me. And so she said, no, it wasn't a terribly difficult delivery. She said, I wish you could have been there. And I wish with all my heart and soul I could have been there too. But anyway, I did get there, and she was the only girl in the nursery. And she had red hair at the time. She's now blonde. I don't know. But at that time she had red hair, and that went away within about a month. But it was a complete. I don't know how to describe it in words. That I realized that as much as my marriage meant to me, now that I had a child, an infant, be responsible for that was a complete, as they say, game changer. I realized that there's no more goofing around. It's time to start taking this whole thing serious. Oh man, which I did. I mean, it wasn't as if I treated my marriage frivolously or anything like that. But I mean, yeah, I had a different, more of a carefree attitude about it than I did when Anne Marie came along. And I realized now I'm a parent. I'm really responsible for someone else, Even though I realized my responsibility to Pat as a spouse, but as a father now, it was a whole different thing. And I really embraced it. I thought, wow, this is really terrific. Over the years, Pat experienced 2 miscarriages. And so we concluded that was enough. I didn't want to put her through any more of that agony, because we were both very, very disappointed. But we had Anne Marie, and she was indeed a blessing, and remains a blessing to this day. My father-in-law, who was at that time chief chemist at U.S. Steel and Southworks, offered me a job working in the chem lab, which was interesting because I had no clue about chemistry or anything like that. in fact, what I wanted to do was get back in the printing trade, but at that time, they wanted $100 to even talk to me. This was what they call the International Typographical Union, to get me back on the job in the printing trade. We didn't have that kind of money. And so I took the job at U.S. Steel. It was a job, I mean, and it paid well, but I knew it was not the future that I wanted. So I talked to Pat about that, and she says, well, why don't you go to school on the GI Bill? And so I hemmed and hawed around a little bit because I really didn't know what school to go to or anything like that. So I started investigating, and ended up, I went down to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. We ended up living in a town called Anna, which was south of Carbondale, about 30 miles and 50 miles north of Cairo. And there was a state hospital there, a psychiatric hospital called Anna State Hospital. And Pat's specialty in nursing was psychiatry. So she got hired on right away, especially since she was a graduate of Rush Presbyterian. That's a very prestigious school. So I would make the commute up to school, and we had initially, when we moved down to Southern Illinois, we moved to a little town called Carterville. And we met this family who took care of, had a nursery school there, the Quarters. Very, very nice people. They had 3 or 4 kids of their own, and just a great bunch of folks. And so they were taking care of 3 or 4 kids who were children of, college students who were either in graduate school or at some other level in their education, but they needed daycare. So I would take Anne Marie to the Quarters, and I would go to class and then pick her up after class and come back home, and I'd study and take care of her and until Pat got home from work. And so we had a nice life down there in Southern Illinois in Anna, and we knew we weren't going to stay in Southern Illinois as much as we liked it, when I graduated. But it was a great experience for both of us, and she enjoyed her work at the hospital. So we were in Anna, and then I graduated from SIU, and I got a job with the state of Illinois, up in Springfield, working for the Department of General Services. And so we moved from Anna to Springfield. And in the meantime, I had gotten injured. Right after I graduated, I took a job because I was waiting for the state to make the formal job offer. But in the meantime, I wanted to work, and I got a job in Marion, Illinois, at a printing company there. And I was alone in the shop late one afternoon, working some overtime to finish this job, and I got my hand caught in the press, and I ended up in the Marion Hospital. Really, it was just such a strange coincidence that I ended up in a hospital with a guy from Ferncliff, Alabama. I'll never forget his name. It was Moses Foster Duke. He's a truck driver, and he had his nephew or cousin in the truck with him, and I guess evidently the trailer was wobbling on the interstate. And so they stopped because he wanted just the fifth wheel. And he's telling me this story while we're in the hospital. And so he says, now be careful because this thing's got a really sensitive clutch. So when you let it out real slow. Well, he had his hand in there on the fifth wheel. And the kid jerked the clutch or whatever. Anyway, the whole thing came down and just split this guy's hand wide open. And I had mashed a couple fingers, ended up losing them. But this guy was in the hurt locker like I couldn't believe. He's Dr. Fox, who was this crusty old orthopedic surgeon down there, and was used to patching these farm boys together. They got their hands caught in mining equipment down there and stuff like that. And he said, Moses asked him if I could lose my hand. And he says, well, I can give you something to put a glove on. And I'm thinking to myself, I may have gotten hurt and I'm in pain right now, but it's not going to impair my ability to make a living. Pat was obviously very upset that I was hurt. Anne Marie really didn't understand it. She was too young. But anyway, we were both very thankful that it was nothing worse than what it was, and just a minor setback. But it told me just to convince me more and more what a caring person she was. The way that she just took care of me after I got out of the hospital and everything else, and made sure that everything was okay with my hand, and address the wound and that type of stuff. Make sure that I got the right kind of treatment for it. Anyway, the state finally came through, and so we moved up to Springfield and got an apartment. And Pat did not work for a little while, but then she got a job, was offered a job at a social service agency they called Family Planning at the time. The family planning was to teach young women and girls about birth control and, abstinence and that type of thing, and how to take care of yourself. I mean, it was amazing the number of people, the number of women who just really didn't, at least at that time, would seem to be ignorant of what this was all about. And it always amazed Pat, how could you not know, what's going on? What did your mother teach you, for heaven's sake? And so she was involved in that for quite a while. But she always wanted to get back into psychiatry. And so ultimately she left that because they started becoming more and more inclined towards wanting these young women to have abortion available to them. Pat could not, that was absolutely not something she could tolerate. She was just aghast at that type of thing. She said, that's not medical care, that's anything but. And so she resigned from that position, which I admired her for. I really thought she's really swimming against the tide on this one. So anyway, she got a job at, I can't remember, Springfield Memorial, I think was the name of the hospital. There's two. There was St. John's and another big hospital there. And she got a job at not at St. John's, but at the Memorial Hospital in psychiatric ward, doing what she really wanted to do. And then we bought our first house in Chatham. And I got that as a result of the settlement I got from the injury I sustained. Instead of spending the money on some crazy trip to the Bahamas, we bought ourselves a house down in Chatham, Illinois. That was really nice, And she had, back at Cherry Point, when she was working at this is just the way she was. I mean, she was very much the domestic person that wanted to really make a home. The government issued you furniture when they put you in government housing. I mean, it was pretty Spartan. It was nice and it was in good repair, but it was not something that Pat really liked at all. Well, she had in commuting between Cherry Point and Carteret County Hospital in Morehead City, she would go through a little town called Auburn, North Carolina, and there was a furniture store right on the main road. So she stopped there one time after work and spied some furniture and decided that she wanted to really spiff up our home with our own stuff. And so she came home one evening. She says, "Guess what?" She says, "I found some really nice furniture." And I'm thinking, well, what do we need furniture? We got a chair and a sofa, a couple lamps, and What do we, I'm just not thinking of this domestic stuff. And if it was left to me, this place would look like the squad band of barracks. So I have no sense of taste when it comes to that stuff whatsoever, but she did. And so she she talked me into coming down to the furniture store, and they cut us a real nice deal, I guess. I mean, Pat was the one making the money, you know, and so she bought this furniture and still got the original bedroom set up in the attic. Uh, but it was just, I mean, it just made such a lovely home. I mean, it was something far nicer than I had growing up. Not that my mother didn't try, but my mother was trying to, as a widow, raise two young boys in a pretty rough and tumble situation. And but Pat just wanted a really nice home, and she did. She always made a lovely home. I mean, wow, this woman really has class.
Rising through the ranks every weekday slight, in the boardrooms where we make the fight, pushing papers, deals in plain sight.
Oh, then I left state employment to went to work for a printing company in Springfield for a couple of years, and I got a series of job offers while I was working at that company because I had met a number of different printers throughout the state by virtue of managing some state contracts for printing. So I got to know quite a few people, and I got a pretty good reputation with it. And at that point, Pat had gotten an offer to become what they call a nurse practitioner, which I guess is pretty much it falls somewhere between being an RN and an MD. There's certain things that nurse practitioners can do way above the level of just an RN, but not quite at the level of being an MD. At that same time, I got an offer for another job in Peoria at a printing company up there, and I asked her if she'd postpone the nurse practitioner thing to see how this job thing worked out in Peoria. And so she said, okay. So I took the job in Peoria, and it turned out that was really a mistake. I shouldn't have gone up there. It was not the right time. It was not the right setting. It just didn't gel. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't understand what was going on in the company. It just was a different culture. And I just didn't meld well, or I didn't feel comfortable with it. And we were having difficulty selling the house. At that time, I guess the market was down. I really don't remember the circumstances. But so anyway, I came back to Springfield. And shortly after that, I got another job offer up in Dubuque, Iowa. So we did make the move we sold the house, we did make the move to Dubuque. And went to work for the Telegraph Herald, their commercial printing division, which was over in East Dubuque on the Illinois side of the river. Pat went along with the program, and we got a house in Dubuque, and she started working again at, I forget which one of the hospitals, but again, back in psychiatry. And Anne-Marie was in school, and she was doing well in school. And we were there for a year when I got an offer from a software company out of Massachusetts. At that time, there was really just two computer companies. There was IBM, and there was everybody else. And there weren't that many of everybody else, except for a couple small companies like Digital and Data General, who had first introduced mini computers. And computerization, business computerization in the printing industry was virtually non-existent. But this company out of Massachusetts called Stewart Systems had developed this mini computer system to assist small commercial printers in doing estimating. And the whole idea behind Stewart Systems product was to automate that whole thing. Feed the data into the little mini computer and voila, out pops an estimate in the various quantities and shows you how much press time, how much time in prep, and how much time in a bindery, and et cetera, all the various operations that need to happen to make this particular printed piece come to life. It was really, it was jokingly said, this is the first innovation in the printing industry since Gutenberg invented movable type. And it took off like a rocket. I mean, we could not sell and implement the stuff fast enough. And Stewart Systems, we left Dubuque and moved to Elmhurst. So again, another move, relocating the family back to the Chicago area, which was good and bad. It was good to be back in the hometown, I suppose, but there was some downside to it too, which I won't elaborate on. But we got a home in Elmhurst, and things were moving rapidly within this company. I mean, they said, we want you to go to California because we want to open up an office out there and we want to staff it up, and you're just the guy we want to run the West Coast operation. So went to We'd only been in Elmhurst a year. We were a year and a half in Dubuque. We were a year in Elmhurst. And she said, another move, you got to be kidding. I said, no. I said, but they're really making a very attractive offer. And I told her, so she says, okay. I knew she wasn't tickled pink about it, but she was willing to go along with it. And I, about that time, started thinking, I'm really kind of taking advantage of this whole situation, And as much as I wanted the job and the money that went with it and all that, I knew that I was pushing the limits tolerance here. And a couple more moves like this, and it's going to be a whole different conversation. So I wasn't oblivious to the whole notion. So I wanted to make it as pleasant as possible for Pat and Anne Marie. And we were both concerned about Anne Marie transferring schools again. And I must say that, California was great. The weather was beautiful. But neither one of us felt at home. And I was traveling all up and down the West Coast, into Canada, as far east as Texas, as far north as Moose Jaw and Anchorage. And so I was on a plane a lot. And I was gone a lot. And that was not a good thing. I mean, I was making money. Providing so well for your family isn't everything. There's got to be, to me at least, there has to be more of a balance to that whole thing. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I'm living very nicely now because of the blessings that God gave me, which I really didn't fully appreciate, that it was all from Him from the beginning anyway. He's the one that made it all possible. But it was stretching things to the limit. It really was. And I was being very selfish. To be very honest, I was being very, very selfish. And that was wrong because, again, this whole notion of Pat going to nurse practitioner school came up. And we couldn't possibly figure out how that could work with my travel schedule. Anne-Marie being in school and her commitment to whatever training it required to become a nurse practitioner. So again, that was put on the table. Pat would bring it up from time to time, and we talk about it. And yeah, we had disagreements about it. And then I persuaded her of the fact that, look, you've got, pretty much to do whatever you want. Money's no object, et cetera, in the hopes that that would mollify her. And I think she just went along with the program. I mean, she kept a game face, but I knew it was a disappointment to her because that was the way she was. She was extremely loyal. She was just this. I mean, it's never a question of, her loving me or me loving her. I could have loved her more by expressing that through making the opportunity available to her to do what she wanted to do. But on the other hand, she was living a very comfortable life. Money was not an issue. In fact, she was managing the money, and I had more money than I ever had. She was very, very good at that, very good at that stewardship. But no, she had aspired to become a nurse practitioner, and that was a dream. It was becoming more and more distant all the time. And had I been here more on a more consistent basis, coming home every night so she could do that, it would have made a difference to her. And I've always felt bad about that. That was not right. I should have done something different. And then the company said, well, we want you to move to Boston, where the headquarters is, and become national account manager. That means I would be responsible for all the U.S. and Canada, for all the account managers, or consultants, I guess is another word for it, that we used to send out to do implementations. And I said, well, I don't want to move to Boston because I don't want to be traveling all the way across the country, a couple times a month. If I have to, I'd rather move to Chicago. That way we cut the travel time in half. I can come to Boston routinely, but if I have to fly to LA or San Francisco or Seattle, it's not 6 hours, it's, 3.5, 4. And I said, okay. So we left California. So we moved in here and, Pat got to work busy squaring this place away. And Anne-Marie started in the school. And at that time, I had gotten interested in the broader array of enterprise software systems. That's something beyond just the printing industry, in more of other kinds of manufacturing as well. And so I got a job offer from a company called PCR. And at that time, Pat had gotten involved with this agency in downtown Aurora called Rachel's Place, which took care of elderly people with dementia, and was really enjoying the work because, again, it was involved with mental health and that type of thing. And I was traveling and selling software. I was traveling down in Tennessee and Kentucky, were my sales territory. So again, I was back on the road. And Anne-Marie's in school, and at this point, Pat had really kind of just put on the shelf, I think, pretty much forever, the whole notion of becoming a nurse practitioner. And I don't know, it's because she just lost enthusiasm for it, and just, why waste my time worrying about it's not going to happen? And I was always rattling around in the back of my mind, does she really want to do this, resurrect this again? But she seemed not to want to do it. So I did ask her. I said, do you want to do that? She said, I'm not real sure. So, but we were enjoying life. I was, like I said to you before, I was really pushing the limits on how much our relationship could sustain. Pursuing what I wanted to pursue and asking her to put whatever she had in mind on hold or forget it altogether. It's another way of saying the same thing. And she was always there at the end of the day, and wow, no, I was really blessed that she didn't just say, hey, look, buddy, I've had enough of this crap, you know. We were both raised Catholic, so divorce was not something that was really ever an option. We both were rooted in the faith. We kind of drifted away from it during several of those years and didn't start circling back to really wanting to get to reignite our faith, which is what we made. I mean, it was a covenant we made between each other and God. And over those years, we kind of left him out of it. And it wasn't until later on that we really said, we need to get back to that. It's not, we know that we care about each other, but we really made a covenant. I mean, this is something that but we really made a covenant with each other and God that we have to respect. And so that came later. That came, I think, after Anne-Marie got married. And we had more time to spend with each other and to talk about things. What had transpired. Maybe, because in a lot of it, you just get caught up in the day-to-day. And you kind of say, oh, I'll deal with that later on, or I'll deal with this later on, or, whatever. And then things have a funny way of coming back around. Oh man, we should have talked this through earlier, And we both started, quizzing each other, talking to each other more about this. And, we want to go back to the Catholic Church, or should we look somewhere else? Because we were finding things about the church that just didn't square. We both started reading scripture and things just weren't lining up. We couldn't find a scriptural basis for a lot of the stuff that was being taught in the church. But we were reading and learning things that were saying, wow, I wish I'd have known about this earlier. And I think that helped. Anne-Marie and Jeff had 3 kids. And then Pat and Jeff's mother, Donna, would alternate babysitting for the grandkids. And they were having a ball. These 2 little girls and a little boy. And they were just having a ball, babysitting these kids. Donna would, one week she'd work 3 days and Pat would work 2. And then the next week Pat had worked 3 and Donna had worked 2. So they were traveling back and forth. Pat was traveling back and forth to here in Bartlett, the babysit. And she was just having a grand old time. And I was doing my thing on project management. And the kids started getting older, and then Along about the time our oldest granddaughter got in high school, that's when Pat started getting sick. And he got diabetes and then the end-stage renal failure, and then had to do the dialysis. And she was doing real well on the dialysis. Now, I don't care what they tell you, dialysis is only a stopgap measure. Unless you get a kidney transplant, you're always going to be on dialysis. And her brothers offered a kidney transplant. I would have given her both of my kidneys if I could, but I had malaria when I was in Vietnam, so I can't donate blood or donate organs. Even if I was a match, it wouldn't matter. Anne Marie would be willing to give up a kidney for her mother. But Pat said, no, I'm not putting anybody's life at risk for mine. And I was a little angry at her first. Why? What about us? She said, I am thinking about us. I'm also thinking about everybody else that's be affected by this. And I must admit that being disappointed at that juncture that I wish she would have taken them up on the offer, but she wouldn't do it. She adamantly refused. And she was going to the dialysis center. She had to go, what was it, every day of the week, I think, or 3 times a week. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think it was 3 times with doing the hemodialysis. And she was doing so well, they said, well, you could be on home dialysis. They call peritoneal, where instead of being on a machine, it's a different method, but it accomplishes the same process of flushing the kidneys and the bad stuff out of your system. So I got her set up in this room right here behind us. And got the machine set up in here, and so it was a daily thing. You had to every night, overnight, did this. And she said she became very, very discouraged because there's no end game. I mean, the end game is death. And how long do you last, And she said, I'm a burden to you. You should put me in a nursing home. That not happening. No, I'm not going to turn you over to somebody I don't know. But they'll teach me how to do what I need to do to take care of you. And so I took care of her here. And, Anne Marie and the grandkids would come and see her routinely, and that was always great. She always enjoyed that. But she knew she wasn't going to get better. And she would say, what have I done? And I couldn't answer that question with any clarity or any sense of what I was talking about. I don't know, what have you done? I guess I got angry. Not at her, but at the circumstances. And, I know there were times when I just was not a comfort to her when I should have been. And I regret that. And I did my best. I mean, I'm not the greatest caregiver in the world. I mean, I knew the mechanics of it, but I know my bedside manner leaves a lot to be desired. It was never her that was the issue, it was the circumstances we were in. The disappointment in us not being able to do the things we talked about doing. And she was getting around and everything else, and one day she's upstairs and she's heading to the stairway, and all of a sudden her ankle just crumbles. She falls. And that's one of the things about dialysis that you don't know. It's under the covers, is that it deteriorates the bone. Makes them very brittle, very thin. And they didn't forewarn us about that. So they set her bones in a cast and that type of stuff. And I'm getting a hospital bed in this room here. And I took care of her until she passed in October 2014. And I know she'd have done the same for me. So I still miss her like crazy, but I don't miss her being sick. Well, I still miss her. I have wonderful memories. She graced my life for 47 years. And I've never regretted a minute of it. Other than my own stupidity and incompetence and selfishness. But other than that, I've never regretted it this time. I look at my daughter and I see my wife, She embodies a lot of the same characteristics her mother had, and that's a blessing to me. Some people I know have been married, have gotten remarried since their spouses passed away, and that's fine. I hope they're happy. It just wasn't for me. Treasure your marriage. Treasure each other. Talk to each other. Don't hold anything back. You got to develop that trust. I could trust her and Pat implicitly, and I felt she could feel the same way about me. That whatever else happens in this world, you still have each other. You have to love each other. You have to really give up of yourself, which is hard to do. Most of us have some set of goals or aspirations that we feel are preeminent. And at least in my case, we're willing to kind of shove anything else aside or move anything else out of our way. Not a good idea. It doesn't mean you can't achieve that, but you've got to consider the other person, because you already made a commitment to each other anyway. So this isn't a spectator sport. Both people are involved all the time. Both people have a say in what's going to happen. And you're not always going to agree, and that's okay. But you should always respect each other. I just want to say to my family how much I appreciate, love, and respect all of you. How proud I am of what my grandchildren have accomplished. Both my granddaughters have graduated from college and have good jobs. I have a grandson who's in the Marine Corps, serving his country right now, and I think their parents have done a marvelous job in raising those three kids, and I'm exceedingly proud of of what they've done, and I thank them for their love and their concern about me. And anybody that sees this video, I hope you check the like box and pass it on to your friends.
Il mio cuore si eleva e ti trova vicino.
È vero, il tempo vola via, ma la tua voce ferma il mio orologio.
Il tempo scorre inesorabile, ma con la tua aria io.
È vero, seguo sempre il ritmo nelle stelle. Il sogno si perde, ti sento accanto.